gasoline by weight has the most energy by weight of anything that mankind has discovered. It's almost like a miracle. So it's still a product, of course, but it's almost like a miracle, the fact that you can hop in your car and drive 450 miles on a tank of gas.
My name is Mike Mauceli, and this is the Energy Show with REI Energy, where we're energizing your investments and maximizing your tax deductions. Today, we're going to be talking about oil under Trump, and you're going to discover how oil and gas and Biden's Green New Deal will be impacted after Trump's win. My guest today is Jim Rickards. Jim is a New York Times best-selling author and economist. He's the editor of the Strategic Intelligence and a financial newsletter. He's also the author of the newly released book, Money GPT, AI, and the Threat to the Global Economy. Great to have you on the show today, Jim.
You're welcome, Michael. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so I wanted to really talk a little bit about, Trump's victory and oil and gas, really kind of drill down on it because, as energy obviously was probably one of the major drivers of inflation due to the Inflation Reduction Act and the Green New Deal or Green New Scam, as Trump calls it, and
Well, Trump got that from me. We actually started using that expression about 2.5 years ago in our publication, so we have it in print. But the word gets out, and then Trump was giving a speech, and he said the Green News, the Green News scam, and he goes, I kind of like that. I think I'll use that, like as if he invented it. But we had actually, because I was saying a Green New Deal, I was like, no, it's the Green New Scam, and we actually came up with that a couple of years ago. So I was glad to see it catch on.
So how did that impact create inflation?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, so the inflation was there on the numbers. Obviously, everybody saw it either at the gas pump or the grocery store, or rents, mortgage interest, you name it. It was everywhere you looked around. It was not just a big factor in the election, it was the biggest single factor. Now, there was a list of issues, immigration, crime, there were a number of issues that people were focused on. But inflation was actually number one. And a very interesting point was, so inflation is going down. So in June 2023, it was 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. Today, it's around 2.4%, and it's coming down. So the White House would have you believe, well, prices are coming down. Well, prices are not coming down. Inflation is coming down, but prices are still going up. They may be going up more slowly than they were, which is true, but they're still going up. And more to the point, even if inflation were zero, it's not zero, but let's just say inflation was zero. What does that mean? It means that prices stay where they are. This high level that they popped up or doubled or tripled, as the case may be, in the last couple of years, would still be there. But the way the Americans think about it is like, no, if butter was $2 a pound and today it's $7 a pound, I won't be happy until it's back to $2 a pound. Can you please put it back to where it was 2 years ago, not 20 years ago? It's not like talking about, as a kid, a nickel would get you in the movies, but you don't need that. But 2 years is not a long time. And the answer is no. Even with zero inflation, which we don't have yet, prices would still be at these high levels, and that still aggravates people. And the history of throwing politicians out when prices go up too far, too fast, is a long one. So that's not the only explanation for the election, but that's part of it. Now, the oil and natural gas part of it, yeah, oil prices went up a lot. They were, close to $90 a barrel at one point. Gas at the pump was, $5 for premium, more in California because of taxes. But the interesting thing about the oil business and gasoline prices, and Michael, you know more about this than I do, it is self-correcting to an extent, meaning the cure for high oil prices is high oil prices because consumption slows down and they come down, or more explorers come in, et cetera. So inflation can come from the demand side, meaning unions go on strike, they get wage increases, they spend more, they demand more, employers take the higher wages and they build it into the prices. That's demand. That's called demand pull inflation. But there's also called supply push inflation. And what that is when there are supply chain problems, bottlenecks, and we saw those in 2022. We all know the supply chain fell apart. So the thing with oil prices is that the reason oil prices are going down today, there's no supply problem today. I mean, there's anything is
Right.
oversupply. You got OPEC, but you can talk about OPEC, but it really comes down to the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. OPEC will kind of go along with Saudi Arabia. Russia's not a member of OPEC, but they're in the room. They're part of it. They call it OPEC plus, but that means Russia. And of course, the United States. They're the three biggest oil producers in the world. They produce about well over 30% of all the oil in the world, just those three countries.
Mhm.
Now, the problem was coming from the United States in a couple of respects. Um, but the Biden administration, Biden Harris did everything possible to keep oil prices up, but it had nothing to do with production. They discontinued the Keystone XL pipeline. They limited new drilling permits on federal lands. They limited new drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, in Alaska. They did not build any new refineries. They did everything possible to keep actually limit U.S. output and keep the price up. But this was not, did it punish American consumers? Absolutely. Did it hurt the US economy? Yes. But their goal is they want to get rid of the whole industry. They want to get rid of oil and natural gas, period. They want to replace it with solar modules and windmills and electric vehicles and a lot else. It's completely impractical. We don't have to go through the science in depth, but the science is clear that, um, you know, I have, I built the largest solar module array, non-commercial in New England on my farm. The towns and industries have bigger ones, but I have the biggest kind of private residential array. I had to clear 3 acres to do it. People go, "Why'd you need 3 acres for that much solar?" I say, "Well, in New England, we have trees and they fall on things, and you don't want them falling on your towers. But I have nine, my arrays are 9 by 15 feet
Wow.
each, and I have nine of them on steel. But it produces 7.25 kilowatt hours, which is nice, but it powers one house. And, it's fine. It doesn't work at night, it doesn't work in the snow. But the point is, how are you going to run a city on that? You're not.
Yeah.
All you can you're either going to have coal or oil and gas or nuclear, but you're not going to do it with solar modules and windmills. So it never made sense, but that was the agenda. And for them, I mean, the Biden administration would like to see gasoline $10 a gallon. Because the theory is the higher you make the price of gasoline, the more attractive electric vehicles, all the other things we talked about, solar, windmills, EVs, all those things, they're not really economic today. It's like they're up here. But if you can get the price of gasoline up here, then all of a sudden those things they're still expensive. Most people can't afford them, but they look relatively more attractive. But the agenda makes no sense. It's not backed up by economics. It's not backed up by science. It's pure ideology. And fortunately, with Trump's victory, this will all go out the window now. It's going to be drill, baby, drill.
Well, when you look at places like California, of course, they're still embracing this all electric vehicles by 3035. And,
Yeah.
they want nothing but electric trucks coming in and out of their state. I mean, that's going to keep inflation high and fuel prices high in a state like California, right?
Well, it will, or else they'll just bypass California. There comes a time when you're a trucking company or a business person or a car dealer or a lot else, and you're trying to do what California tells you to do. But when they go to extremes, which they have, there comes a time when you just write off California, treat it like Zimbabwe, and say, well, okay, I'm not going to do business there. It doesn't make sense. And I don't think those things will come to pass. You're right, Michael, about the legislation. The legislation is in place. The goals are in place. They have these 5-year, 10-year horizons. But in my view, those will be repealed or mitigated before they actually kick in because it doesn't work. It's one thing to set a goal if you can achieve it. It's another thing if you set a goal that's like physically, I mean, laws of physics, physically impossible to do. And that's what they've done. Look, an electric vehicle is a glorified golf cart. Electric vehicles were invented in 1837. They peaked in around 1910. In 1910, 90% of the taxis in New York City were electric. Why isn't that true today? Well, this guy Henry Ford came along and took the internal combustion engine and made an affordable car. And by the way, gasoline by weight, if you leave aside radioactive materials, uranium and plutonium, put them to one side. Gasoline by weight has the most energy by weight of anything that mankind has discovered. It's almost like a miracle. So it's still a product, of course, but it's almost like a miracle. The fact that you can hop in your car and drive 450 miles on a tank of gas, that 70 miles an hour is amazing.
Yeah.
People take it for granted, but you think about it, it's pretty amazing. So you have a technology that works, highly efficient. Why would you run it off the road? No pun intended, for something that doesn't work. So these mandates are going to be repealed, but not right away. And in the short run, yeah, it's a real headache. And but you're not, people are moving out of California partly for reasons like this.
But when you look at like automobiles, for example, and the cost of a car today, I mean, I've just been out pricing a new truck, and I mean, they're close to $100,000 just for
Yep.
a pickup truck. And but when it comes down to it, it's all of these government add-ons that they're putting on to these cars in order to try to get this gas mileage, right? I mean, it's not the combustion engine itself. I mean, if they would just let the let the car dealer, the automobile manufacturers work, I mean, they could make a more efficient engine without all of the parts and stuff that they have to include in it.
That's exactly right. I like German cars. I've been buying Audis for about 40 years, but I'm right now I live up in New Hampshire and coming to you from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Our motto here is live free or die. But I lived many years in Connecticut, and Connecticut had a requirement. We had to take an emissions test. It was part of the car inspection, whatever. So I had a brand new Audi A8, which is a big car, and I took it in, and the guy takes the intake rod or whatever it was, and puts it up the exhaust, and he says, leave the engine running. We're going to take the samples. I get fine, whatever. And I'm killing time. And I'm sitting there 15, 20, 25 minutes. I said, what's going on? And he said, well, we have to keep doing this because we're not getting any reading. And I said, well, that tells you how clean the car is. You're not going to get a reading because this is a very clean, efficient engine. And finally, he agreed and they let me go. But they couldn't, they had their detector, but they couldn't detect anything. That's how clean the car was. And by the way, we could use a little more CO2 in the atmosphere. CO2, they're trying to, the green news scammers are trying to tell you it's poison. Like, I'm sorry, I just exhaled some CO2. If it's poison, my lungs are filled with it. How could it be poison if I'm breathing it out? But the point is, CO2 is plant food. Humans take in oxygen and exhale CO2. Plants take in CO2 and produce oxygen. It's a very virtuous cycle. If you reduce CO2 too much, you're going to kill plant life and we're all going to starve to death. So I could make a case, a scientific case, for a little more CO2 in the atmosphere, help the plants out a little bit. But no, all the science is wrong. Sorry, the science of the green scam is wrong. More and more scientists are willing to speak up. They're not getting, they're not worried as much as they were until very recently about getting deplatformed or, not getting research grants or getting kicked out of universities. And there's some good science coming along, and it shows. I mean, for example, we can debate global warming. I mean, climate change is real. It's real. Then 200 BC, we had the Roman warm period. A lot of scholars think that this helped Hannibal come over the Alps with his elephants because it was kind of warm at that time. Another medieval warm period around 1000 AD. This is when the Vikings were growing grapes in Greenland. You can't do that today. You'd be under ice. But they were farming and raising livestock in Greenland. That's why they called it Greenland, because there were plants there. And they made it all the way to Newfoundland and up the St. Lawrence River. But then from about the 14th century to the 19th century, but very much focused around 1650, 17th century, they had what they called the Little Ice Age, where Europe was unusually cold. It was so cold that the Thames River froze solid. You didn't need a bridge. You could walk across the river. And they used to have what they call ice fairs, which were basically, flea markets and merchants and goods for sale on the river. They would set up their sales booths on the river. That's how cold it was. So, now it's warming up again. But so climate change is real. The question is what causes it. And we know the answer. It's hard to get really, really sharp models, but the answer is solar cycles, volcanoes, ocean currents. And by the way, the biggest greenhouse gas is water vapor. It's, clouds do retain heat a little bit. The CO2 thing is a complete myth. The climate nuts have it backwards. They say CO2 causes global warming. No, global warming, if it exists, causes more CO2 to be released. So there is a correlation between warming and CO2, but it's the warming that causes the CO2 release, not the other way around. So they've got the basic science backwards, among other things. But I think Trump is going to tear up a lot of this stuff. They're going to supersede some state regulations. He's going to drill, baby, drill. Again, drilling in the Gulf, drilling in Alaska,
Yeah.
more permits on federal lands, new pipelines, et cetera. And by the way, I do a lot in geopolitics, and obviously we can talk about energy, but I do a lot in economics and geopolitics, and follow the war in Ukraine very closely. I get battlefield reports on a daily basis. Uh, Without taking sides, I mean, obviously we can take that to the bar, but just in terms of the economics of it, if you want to stop Putin in his tracks, you want to stop Putin in his tracks, get the price of oil down to $30 a barrel.
Yeah.
That's how you get Putin. Now, you think about it, Biden is like throwing in Bradley fighting vehicles, Abrams tanks, attacking missiles, Patriot anti-missile batteries, F-16s, you name it, $200 billion spent in Ukraine, but they're keeping the price of oil up around 70, and Putin's reserves are at all-time highs. I mean, he's getting dollars. The boycotts haven't worked. The embargoes haven't worked. High oil prices are funding the war. We're paying Russia's war expenses by because the greenest scam is keeping oil prices high. If you want to stop Putin, get oil down to, like I say, $25-$30 a barrel, and that'll shake him up because he won't have the revenue to keep doing what he's doing. I've suggested that to a few economists. They're like, hey, pretty good idea. But you can't, the White House they're ideological. They're kind of oblivious to this.
So when you look at, like, for example, LNG, and LNG, obviously Putin's selling natural gas into Europe, and of course during the war, I guess a lot of that has been curtailed. But then Biden and them come in and they want to stop the new LNG plant. Now Trump's going to open them back up. I mean, are we going to
Right.
be able to retake the position, I guess, that Australia now has taken a lot of our LNG business away? Are we going to be able to sell into that market?
Yeah, because look, there'll be an impact on the price. I mean, the price will come down. I live in New England. We're all for low natural gas prices, but I understand if you're a producer, you want them higher. But yeah, we'll be able to do it very efficiently. Look, you're competing with Qatar. There might be some more natural gas coming out of the Middle East. Of course, you got Gazprom, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Australia. We're all on the market. But there's always a place for the low cost producer. So the question for the US is, yeah, we can produce natural gas like crazy, but can we do it at reasonable cost? I think the answer is yes. So you'll be able to get market share. I mean, a lot of these are long-term, take or pay contracts, but they have to be rolled over, and there are new uses in developing economies. And I would think that there's a good place, a good role for U.S. natural gas producers to participate. The other thing, I mean, on the oil side, just for a minute, I like Marathon Oil. It's not an investment recommendation; it's just my analysis. But one of the things I like about them is they're not just in exploration and production, but they're big in refineries. The United States has not built a new refinery since the 1970s, and we should. I expect we will, but that's going to take 5 years or longer. And in the meantime, Marathon has a good refinery base.
Well, that's one of the things I talk about is that, if you want to bring oil prices down, obviously you have to build more refineries, right? Because we just can't refine enough of the product in order to bring prices down. I mean, that theoretically is one of the largest reasons why oil prices are a lot higher. I mean, we got plenty of oil. We're producing more oil in the United States than we ever have in history. But the
Right.
problem is that we can't refine that real high gravity crude unless we mix it with a lower gravity crude, because our refineries aren't set up that way. So a lot of our
That's
oil
right. And
goes overseas.
we're importing refined product in the United States, even though we have we're the the largest oil output, but we're importing refined product. That's exactly right. But there's a good opportunity there, a good investment opportunity for those who can build refineries. And you just have to get it's all on the permitting. And with the Green New scam, they don't want it. But that's another area where Trump will open the door and allow the permits.
So how does internationally, how do the countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia and international oil producing companies, how are they taking Trump coming back into power?
Uh, Yeah, they're well, they're wary, partly for the reason we just discussed, which is the U.S. is going to like open the spigots and lower the price. Again, you can make money if you're a low cost producer, or but I think Saudi Arabia is the ultimate low cost producer, so they'll be okay. Russia, it's more difficult. It is going to be difficult for them. But on the other hand, you have to look at the demand side. And Africa is booming. Like there's a lot of corruption, a lot of problems in Africa. We all know what they are, but economically they're booming. One of the few places on earth where population is still expanding. China, the population is not growing, but the economy is still a huge economy, still growing, still enormous demand for oil. Japan needs it badly. So these are huge markets. So I guess what I would say, Michael, is if you have putting oil to one side, energy to one side, and look at the rest of your economic policies, if they're good policies and they're going to grow the economy and they're going to create entrepreneurship and jobs, the demand will come back. So demand is lagging right now. The reason oil prices are dropping is partly it's from the demand side. People not driving as much, unemployment goes up. It's one thing to say I want uh, you know, cheaper gas at the pump, but if you're unemployed, you might not be buying any gas. So, but a prosperous economy, the kind of economy I foresee under the Trump administration, not right away, by the way. This will take
Yeah.
the better part of a year to roll out. I would look for very strong growth in years 2, 3, and 4. Year one might be a prolonged speed bump because we got to get past the legacy of the Biden administration. Might even have a recession in the first quarter next year, the early part of the Trump administration. But down the road, 1, 2, 3, 4 years out, it should be the demand side should come back strong. The so you say, how do you maintain prices? It's not by restricting output. That's what OPEC does, but it's really by increasing demand.
Yeah.
And I think Trump will play a big role there.
No, I agree with you. I don't know if I'll see if I believe that it'll come down to $30, $35 a barrel because a lot of these new horizontal wells, I mean, they're costing 14, $15 million just to drill them. So, they're expensive
Yep.
wells, but I do think $50, $60 a barrel is very possible. I mean, that's what we saw
Right.
pre-COVID, I think, right before COVID hit. But
Yep.
so I think that's a good possibility there. And no, I think I'm excited about it. I tell you what, I think the whole country's kind of excited about, change and getting back to the way things were and, where
Yeah.
everybody has a chance to move forward in life instead of having to worry about, just all the ridiculous things that went on for the last 4 years.
Oh yeah, getting a deplatformed, kicked off of social media. If not they having the FBI break down your door. Yeah, it was pretty hairy time.
So when you say when a lot of these people say right now, like we're going to Trump proof the economy, we're going to come out with all these things where we're gonna set it up where Ukraine gets another $200 billion, and I mean, can they actually do that in the government? I mean, I know you've been in the government before, knows how it
Yeah.
works.
Well, first of all, they're definitely trying to do that, and there are a number of statutes I could point to without getting too far in the weeds that
Right.
a lot of times Congress passes a law authorizing an agency or authorizing a program, and they give it a sunset. Say, well, this law expires, 4 years from now, whatever. And then what it does, the Congress likes that because it means you have to renew it, so you can get more money from the lobbyists, you can, spin up the media, play the game and then renew it. But most of them kind of get renewed automatically. It's just a way to get campaign contributions. But in early this year, in January, when the Congress approved the additional aid to Ukraine, it was, I believe, a $60 billion package. They they put provisions in there that these this law cannot be changed, and these loans and guarantees and what they were going to do with the Russian assets could not be changed for 5 years. Well, in other words, until the end of the Trump administration, the 5 years wasn't random. They from April 2024 to April 2029. Guess what happens in 2029? Trump's gone. So this is what they call Trump proofing. In other words, exactly what you described, which is pass laws, pass regulations, implement things so that you can lock in the progressive, woke, anti-American advantage in such a way that Trump can't do anything about it. So that is true and it is going on. And I could give you many examples. Having said that, this is why the congressional side of the election equation was so important. The Republicans not only took the Senate, they've got right now 53 senators, maybe 54, a couple of races undecided. We'll see what happens. My friend Carrie Lake in Arizona and the candidate in Nevada. But the Republicans could end up with 55 or 54 easily, but they've got 53 locked in. The reason that's important, you don't actually right now, or under the Trump administration, you don't even need 51 votes to pass something. You would only need 50 because if it's a tie, J.D. Vance has a tiebreaker. The vice president of the United States is the president of the Senate and has a tie-breaking vote. So you only need 50. It's great to have 51, 52, 53, et cetera. But the point is you got a couple flakes. You got Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine. I'm sitting here in New Hampshire. I can look out the window. I can see Maine. It's right across the river over there. It's a very liberal place. So I guess Susan Collins has to do what she has to do to stay in office. But you could never, and they did the right thing on the judicial appointments, but you can never totally count on Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, but as a Republican. But the point is now you don't have to, because
Yeah.
you could lose those two votes and still have 51 or 52 on your side. That's a big deal because now, even if Biden has tried to Trump-proof the government with legislation, you can repeal that legislation. Now, if you don't have the Senate, you can't do it. Or if you don't have the House, you can't do it. But if you have both, you can do whatever you want, and they will. There'll be teams going through and undoing all that. I promise you, when after Trump is inaugurated and he goes to the Oval Office, there'll be a White House photographer there. You're going to see a stack of executive orders this high sitting on his desk. And they print them up on nice paper. They put them in these nice leather binders with the gold seal of the president on the front. And Trump's just going to take them and sign them, sign the next one, sign the next one, and keep going. They're going to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. They're going to reimpose Iranian sanctions, reactivate the Keystone XL pipeline, on and on and on. By the way, they're already written. All these executive orders, there's a transition team. They've got a lot of good lawyers. They'll be tweaked a little bit, but they've already been written. They will be printed and bound and on his desk on day one. He's going to sign all of them. So things are going to happen very quickly, as I was saying, in a very, very positive way.
Great. Well, I know you're pressed for time, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. Can you tell our listeners about your new book?
Would love to. It's called Money GPT. Got a copy right here. Money GPT, AI and the threat to the global economy. So AI is artificial intelligence, GPT, generative pre-trained transformers. It's a particular kind of artificial intelligence. GPT that's the thing that you can give it a prompt. It'll give you an answer. It'll write an essay. By the way, I wrote the book myself. It was not written by a robot, but college kids are getting GPT to write their term papers and all that stuff. That's a whole other thing that's going on. But artificial intelligence is huge. It's powerful. This is not really a book about what's coming. I make the point that it's already here. You open your refrigerator and there's a message, time to change the water filter. That's AI. I mean, some computer chip is monitoring the water filter, got a clock running and telling you what to do. It's on the dashboard of your car. It's in Alexa and Siri. So artificial intelligence is everywhere. It's here now. And
How
it's
is
very
that going to be
powerful.
used? How is that going to be used against people in the government?
Well, it's going to be used by the government, by private actors, by foreign intelligence service. It's going to be used by everybody. So that's why it's so important for readers to understand what it is. Now, let me give you a simple example. AI in bioengineering, biomedicine, et cetera, can look at different molecular compounds and identify those that might have some effect as a treatment for a certain disease. Now, humans can do that, but 100, genius IQs sitting in a room with laboratory equipment, working night and day, couldn't in 100 years, they couldn't get through all these combinations, but a computer can do it very quickly. So there will be, there already have been some very interesting breakthroughs and discoveries from AI in the pharmaceutical field. Engineering, it applies to a lot of things. I mentioned that, but that's not really what the book is about. In the book, I try to stay in my lane, which is capital markets and banking on the one hand, and national security on the other. So I talk about how AI applies to those. And it's not a doom and gloom book, but it does offer a warning to investors and to users. And I'll give you a real quick example. So let's say you're at a baseball game and you don't have a good view because the guy in front of you, he's got a big hat or he's too tall or whatever. So you stand up and all of a sudden, hey, I can see everything. It's a great view. But what happens next? The person behind him stands up. The person behind her stands up. And next thing you know, everybody's on their feet. Nobody has a better view, and everybody's worse off because you're all standing up.
Yeah.
That's something called the fallacy of composition. It sounds like a fancy word, but what it means is things that work at the individual level, things that can be very good strategies for an individual, can be catastrophic if done at a large scale. Now, let's just take that idea and bring it over to capital markets. So let's say you're in a stock market crash, and they happened. In March 2020, stock market fell 30% in 30 days. It was not the biggest crash in history, but it was the fastest crash of that magnitude in history. The stocks had never gone down that far, that fast, as I say, just in a window of 30 days. So what do people do in that situation? Well, you start with human nature. You're watching it go down. You're like, hey, it's hard to make money, but you sure don't want to lose it if you have it. And you're watching your portfolio melt. So you say, okay, I'm going to sell everything, get the cash, go to the sidelines, wait it out. When the market settles down, it's at a bottom, I'll tiptoe back in and then build my portfolio and catch the next wave. That can be a really smart individual strategy. It can really work for you. The problem is what happens if everyone does it? It's like standing up at the baseball game. If everyone does it, you have all sellers, no buyers, prices go straight down, they go through the floor. Not only do you blow through circuit breakers and close the markets could be closed indefinitely. All your stocks basically turn into private equity. So that's that part of that's human nature. But when you combine that with AI, which is an accelerant. It accelerates it, it amplifies it. And AI is not individual. I mean, there may be different companies providing it. I've built AI myself. I've done it for the CIA. I know how it works. All those programs are the same. So when you look at the decline of active investing, the rise of passive investing, human nature, which is like sell everything and go to the sidelines, and then AI, which amplifies that. AI has no nuance and no common sense. They've never been able to program common sense. So there's nothing in AI that says, huh, maybe we could buy the dips here. Maybe I ought to put my toe back in the water or whatever. It's not happening. Everything goes straight down. So that will happen. We explain why. It's a nonfiction book, but I give a narrative involving, a family office and two hedge fund traders who are manipulating markets to crash it, a Chinese cyber warfare unit that's doing the same thing. And they take the markets down. I have a Federal Reserve chair character in the scenario. He's the last to know, of course. But the point is, I describe this exactly how it will happen step by step. And there could be variations, but believe me, it'll happen. But I make the point, there's no mastermind. There's no one, master criminal who's making all this happen. The Chinese warfare unit is not talking to the hedge fund guys. The hedge fund guys are not talking to the family office, et cetera. They're each acting individually, but the interaction, the combination of human nature, which has been around forever, and AI, which is new, fused up, amplified, and accelerated, will cause this kind of market crash. So my advice to investors is don't be 100% in digital assets. And when I say digital, I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies. Stocks and bonds are digital assets. Have some gold, some silver, natural resources, land. Have a set of assets that will retain value and grow, but are not going to get wiped out in the kind of AI-induced market crash that I described.
You think gold's going to continue to go up now that Trump's elected, or is it, you know?
Yeah, it will. And the reason is, again, I think the economy will be good. The dollar will be strong against other currencies. The dollar will be strong against the euro and the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, and so forth. But the dollar and all the currencies will plunge against gold. But the reason is the forces driving gold are bigger than Trump and they're bigger than the US economy. It's the BRICS, it's Russia, China, India, Malaysia, Philippines, even Japan and Turkey, Iran, and others buying all the gold they can, getting ready, basically getting out of the US dollar. I'm not saying the dollar is going to be, disappear or collapse or have no value, at least not in the short run. But the dollar is going to have company, which are the BRICS with their own payment system, and they're going to be able to net settle with their trading counterparts using gold. So the U.S. is not buying gold. Americans don't seem to be interested. They will, $5,000 an ounce, they might wake up and take notice. But the central banks are buyers. They've been net buyers since 2010, and the BRICS are buying very heavily. So gold has a floor and a tailwind independent of Trump and the U.S. economy.
I was listening to a speech the other day by Jamie Dimon, and he says he thinks we're already in World War III. I mean, do you think that or not?
I think it's a pretty, I've been a critic of Jamie Dimon, but I think that's a pretty astute observation. I would go further and say not only are we in something that looks like World War III, but we're moving very quickly towards nuclear war. And I have a chapter on that, on the role of AI and nuclear war fighting. So I mentioned my lanes were, finance and capital markets, yes, but the other one is um, national security and military affairs, where I've been very involved with the Pentagon, the CIA, and other agencies. And we are, I started studying nuclear war fighting in the late 1960s, and the scholars that I studied had done a lot of their work in the late 1950s and early 1960s. So it was Albert and Roberta Wohlstetter, Paul Nitze, Henry Kissinger, but the big brain was Herman Kahn. And Herman Kahn wrote that in terms of how a nuclear war would happen. And he said, nobody wakes up on a sunny day and looks out the window and says, hey, nice day. I think I'll shoot some nuclear missiles. That's not how it happens. It happens through escalation. So you have two protagonists. One party does something provocative. The other party responds. First party raises the ante. The other party responds in kind. And what happens is you're climbing a ladder. And that's how Herman Kahn described it. You're climbing a ladder. You're escalating towards nuclear annihilation. And we have two cases of that right now. One is Ukraine. So Ukraine started 2014 as CIA and MI6 had a coup d'etat. They threw out a duly elected president. Russia retaliated by taking Crimea. U.S. sends weapons into Ukraine. Russia invades Donbass. The U.S. is sending in, F-16s now. They're on that ladder, exactly the way Herman Kahn described it. The Russians are coming back with hypersonic missiles, the Kinzhal and the Zircon missiles and others. And you've got nuclear powers all around, particularly the U.S. and Russia. Same thing in the Middle East. Hamas conducts a slaughter of Jews, killed 1,400 Jews in one day, worst slaughter since the Holocaust. Israel invades Gaza. Hezbollah fires missiles. Israel strikes back at Hezbollah. Iran strikes Israel. Israel hits back. The Houthis are involved. That thing is escalating again. Nuclear powers all around. U.S., Russia is watching closely. Israel is a nuclear power. Iran maybe soon. So you've got two separate wars, not too far distant in physical proximity, both involving the U.S. and Russia, both on this escalatory path. Now, what did Herman Kahn say you should do? He said the first thing you should do is recognize that you're climbing the ladder. Understand what you're doing. And Biden has no comprehension of that, but know that you're heading towards oblivion. Step two, take a beat. Just take a beat. Step three, climb down, de-escalate, climb down the ladder and back away from a very horrific result. So that's how it works. And let's hope we get that kind of leadership. Now, what does AI have to do with that? The question is China and Russia and the United States are looking to put AI, artificial intelligence, in the nuclear kill chain.
Mm.
And we're all familiar with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came close, but Khrushchev and Kennedy did climb down the ladder. as I described it in the end, and we avoided nuclear war. But in the 1980s, there were two cases. One was where U.S. and NATO were conducting a war game, but the war game scenario was a nuclear war. How would you actually play that out? The KGB saw it, but they thought that NATO was using the war game as a front to actually launch missiles. So they were getting ready to launch their own missiles, warming up the bombers, getting the silos prepared to launch this over. It was going up that path. It was extremely dangerous. There was a Lieutenant General, General Perutz, who observed all this and without getting orders, just on his own, said, time out. Let's scale back. Let's scale down the war game. Let's not take the next step. Let's stop playing this out for a minute, for a while. The Russians picked up on it, Soviets at the time, but really Russia, the Russians picked up on it. They backed down. Both sides de-escalated. We narrowly avoided nuclear war. The other case was the Russians had actually an early form of artificial intelligence, codenamed OCO, which would detect incoming U.S. missiles. And it detected 5 U.S. missiles, nuclear missiles aimed at Russia, and it gave a launch warning. And there was a Lieutenant Colonel, Stanislav Petrov, who got the launch warning. His orders were to call his superiors, let them know, and they probably would have fired back because there's launch on warning. You always want to be the first one. If the other guy's striking, you want to fire before his missiles land. But Colonel Petrov looked at this and said he had worked on the system. He knew it had flaws. He said, if the U.S. were attacking, they wouldn't fire 5 missiles. They would fire 500 missiles. I only see 5 coming in. Maybe it's a false alarm, et cetera. Turned out it was a false alarm, that it was basically a reflection of the sun off the clouds that set off the system. So, but the point is, Perutz and Petrov for the U.S. and the Soviet Union and Russia avoided nuclear war. But how did they do it? They did it with intuition, common sense, and gut instinct. It wasn't computers, and they didn't even follow orders. They risked their careers and their countries to avoid a nuclear war. But here's the point, Michael. Computers can't do that. That kind of intuition, you cannot program it. By the way, artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It's all math. It's not actually like a human brain. It's something else. It's powerful, but it's just all math. But the computers cannot do that. So when you put computers in the nuclear kill chain, or you put computers in charge of portfolio selection on Wall Street, what you're missing, and you always will be missing, are things like empathy, sympathy, common sense, intuition, gut instinct, all the ways that humans have survived all these years. So my warning to investors and to the national security establishment, the Pentagon, is if you want to use AI as a tool, that's fine, but don't put it in the decision-making chain, or you're going to climb straight up that ladder to nuclear annihilation.
Well, I agree with you, and I am looking forward to your book. Like I said, I've already made my order for it, so I hope to get it.
Thank you.
I think it'll be a very good book.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Jim, for coming on today.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.